Okay, sorry to rush you with your coffees, but we have overrun slightly. So I'd like to introduce Mike Lewus, who is the technical advisor for the British Stainless Steel Association. Got it right. Mike began his professional working life with research posts in the USA at Virginia Poly Institute and State University and the University of Virginia. There followed 25 years of steel-related R&D experience at Swindon Technology Centre, which is British Steel, Corrosion and Untitled Steel at Rotherham. He then spent 4 years at the University of Sheffield, Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, and for the past 2 years he has been technical advisor at British Stainless Steel Association. I'm sure you know one more experienced than Mike to talk to you about corrosion of stainless steel in the marine environment. Okay,
thanks very much for that, Hilary, and morning everybody. As you can see, the title, it says Corrosion of Stainless Steel in the Marine Environment, which I actually kept looking at and thinking, this isn't a great title. It doesn't seem to promote use of stainless steel too much, and there's a tag onto that. You know, I'm going to talk about factors that do affect performance. So, but we'll see, and I'm sure you'll understand that all engineering metals out there corrode. It's all about what conditions do they start degrading under, you know. So I've got a slide that just gives you a bit of a summary of what I'm planning to cover. I'm going to say a little bit about the BSSA, who we are, what we do. And then I'll just touch on some fairly basic facts and figures of stainless steels, the grades that typically used, what the corrosion properties are. Particularly, I'll come on to the marine environment and look at the aggressivity, the nature of it, a little bit. I mean, there's not time in an hour to cover all these aspects in a lot of detail. And then I'll just go through some examples of corroded components and what's happened. Because I think that'll sort of underpin, give a bit of an insight into maybe how things could have been done better. And interestingly, after seeing all those pictures of damaged ships from Captain Irani, I thought my pictures of corroded components look a little bit tame in comparison, but nevertheless, you can be the judge of that. I also, because I've come down here on a train, I couldn't bring a load of quite weighty components and rather outsized components. Well, I didn't want to carry more than one bag, that bag. But I've got a little offering that I'll just pass round later and see what your opinions are. But I'll ask for your opinions a little bit later when I've gone through some of the sort of corrosion mechanisms that typically can degrade stainless steel. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into what we cover. Let me just say a bit of shameless promotion, but I think it's worthwhile because we are a good technical source of information. So I'm just going to say a little bit about the BSSA. I mean, our role is obviously looking to promote the use of stainless steel in any environment it can be used in. Obviously, the marine one is a particularly important one. That said, we look to promote its use responsibly and appropriately. As the technical advisor, I'm inundated with emails and telephone calls asking advice on all sorts of different aspects of stainless steel. And occasionally, there just isn't an appropriate stainless steel for it. So I'll say, oh, you want to use a nickel silver alloy or something else. So you know, we're trying to do that responsibly. This is just the homepage of our website, and we do get 2 million hits a year now. I mean, it's grown from hundreds of thousands at the inception of this website in 2007 to over 2 million now. And actually half of the hits come from the USA. And as much as 65% come from outside the UK. That said, our jurisdiction is the UK. You know, we're looking to sort of help people overcome technical issues they have with stainless steel in the UK. And I'm going to point 2 quick things out on here. One is there's a search engine, and there's about 1,500 technical articles available on our website. So if you wanted some basic answers to fairly straightforward questions, there's usually a lot of information on there. So you only have to put a search term in that top search box, and you might be surprised what you come up with. Similarly, there's no shortage of suppliers. I mean, we're a trade organisation. We've got nearly 200 members from all parts of the stainless supply chain. It includes big European producers like Outokumpu, Serenox, Aperam, big stock holding companies like AK Steel, ALCO, many others, and a lot of other engineering companies heavily used in stainless steel, fabrication companies, and a lot of end user type companies. So often people come to us simply to find a supplier of something. And besides the technical advice we offer, and I should just hasten to add, although I'm the technical advisor, I certainly don't have all the answers. But I think the strength of our organisation is with our membership, because we're close enough to some expert to be able to get answers to difficult questions. We also do quite a bit of training and education. Our one-day course portfolio is growing. We started out with an introduction course and an understanding stainless steels course. Now we do a one-day course in mechanical testing techniques, heat treatment, and actually in collaboration with IIMS, we are actually putting out a one-day course in marine corrosion. So I'll quickly move on. You know, these are just some examples of technical manuals we give out with our one-day courses. And the new course we're developing, as I say, in collaboration with IIMS, is a marine corrosion and its prevention. In fact, the full title is in small vessels. But, you know, particularly as it covers some of the fundamentals, the sort of corrosion mechanisms that occur in all engineering metals. Today, there's going to be more of a focus on stainless steel. This course will focus on all the engineering metals that are typically used in the marine environment. You know, whether it's small vessels or big vessels, those sort of mental mechanisms don't change. But you can see that there's a number of sections on here that's going to look at corrosion above the waterline, below the waterline, a certain amount on failure analysis and ways of preventing corrosion. And I'll just point out, I brought a few flyers which has all that information in a bit more detail. And if you want to take one, if it interests you, feel free to just take one of those. Oops. Maybe not that grubby one that fell on the floor.
You can have that for a half price, couldn't
you? You can have it for free, they're all free. In fact, I'll have to pay you to take that one now, won't I? Okay, some of the questions might sound quite basic. And you know, sometimes people are ringing me up saying, oh, I've got this material, something's going wrong with it. We think it's 304316. Is it? How do I find out? You know, I've just coined a few questions here. Is stainless steel one material? Is 304 or 316 one specific grade? How do the corrosion properties vary between grades and types? You know, the list goes on, and I would hope by the end of this session, if you don't already know, maybe you'll know the answer. So, let me ask you a question. Is 304 or 316 one grade?
No.
Can you elaborate? How many grades of 316, for example, are there?
SL. There are at least two.
Well, there are a few, and I've jumped the gun. Just let me put that question on hold, because it was the other question I was going to answer first. Is stainless steel the same material? Well, I'm sure, given your occupations, you'll all know that there's more than one type or category of stainless steel. And this sort of lists the important ones, not least austenitic grades, like 316 and 304. Apologies, I'll come back to that question I just posed. We'll get the answer shortly. Yeah, austenitic is the most commonly used grade. I mean, we know 316 is a grade from the 300 series, and then many other grades in that type of stainless steel. And it's the most prevalent because it gives you the most wide-ranging set of properties. But you'll see other types, ferritic, duplex stainless steel, which is no mystery there. Duplex means two. It's because 50% of the volume fraction is ferritic grain structure, 50% is an austenitic grain structure. So we call it duplex. We've got martensitic grades, precipitated hardened grades. So there's quite a family of stainless steels there. I mean, you'll see that the most important ones from tackling the marine environment point of view are austenitics, particularly if it's the right grade. Duplex is particularly important if you want extra strength and you're dealing with a more aggressive part of the marine environment. And inevitably, martensitic and precipitated hardened grains aren't as corrosion resistant generally, but if you want extremely high strength or wear resistance, these are the two. And these grades, particularly precipitation hardened grades, are used for some prop shaft kind of applications. So there's quite a family and a range of materials to choose from. And just to underline how different they are, I'm not going to go into all the detailed metallurgy of this or what the differences in structure, but you can see this is an example of a ferritic stainless steel 409. 316, our widely known grade, a martensitic radius. Without going into the intricacies of the atomic arrangements and the nature of the grades, you can see, just by looking at these diagrams, they've got very different structures. And those structures ultimately feed into the mechanical and physical property set the material's got. So, without saying a lot of detail about it, you can see the metallurgy of these different types is quite different. And what is a stainless steel? Just to put that one to bed, and then I'll come back to the question I asked. Well, there is a definition of a stainless steel. It's in BSCN 10088. Sorry to chuck the standard at you, you may have heard about it or not. It's a harmonised European standard that pretty much lists every standard and special stainless steel that's out there. Compositions, mechanical properties, technical delivery condition of flat and long products, etc., etc. And in there, it defines a stainless steel as having a minimum of 10.5 weight % chromium. Now, the reason that's been developed, or that definition has come up, is 10.5 weight % is considered the minimum for ensuring that there's a chromium oxide layer on the outside of the material. And I think you'll probably all be familiar, or many of you will be familiar with the principle of what it is that gives stainless steel its excellent corrosion properties, at least relative to a lot of other materials. And it's this chromium oxide passive layer that naturally develops on the outside. You know, the chrome reacts with oxygen and we've got a protective layer. The nice thing is, if we scratch it, it actually reforms. But, you know, I'll qualify that. There are some environments where it won't reform, in fact it might degrade, and obviously that's going to be an important part of what we're talking about today. Right, back to the grades. 316 grades, there's a list of them. So what one of you said two, I think others have quite a few. There are quite a few grades, and I think this is one of the things that, certainly from my point of view, at the sort of inquiries front of the BSSA, people are often asking me, what grade do I need for this, what grade do I need for that? They might say, I might say, you'll see later, I'll just touch very briefly at the end of this session on fabrication. And often people are saying, I want 316 because it's corrosion resistant, but they won't know the difference, say, between something like 316 and 316L. I'll talk about sensitization at the end, but if you're doing any fabrication, re-welding, and the materials will be heated to temperature, you definitely don't want 316, you want 316L. And although I've not got an example of it, I've seen certainly on tubular structures, whether it's for mounted photovoltaic cells on boats or structures for the davits. You know, I've seen lots of examples of welds that are rusting quite badly or even suffering interground corrosion. And a lot of the reason is because they haven't used either a low carbon grade. I'll qualify this a lot more when I just briefly get to the fabrication side of things. But it's because they haven't used a low carbon grade or they haven't used a stabilised grade. And I'll explain what that is later. It's probably worth keeping in mind that there are other grades that come under the category 316. L stands for low carbon, N stands for increased nitrogen. Nitrogen actually has quite an important impact on pitting resistance. You'll see there's an empirical formula coming up later that just defines pitting resistance in terms of one or two metrics. But we also have LMN, M is elevated molybdenum. You'll see again later, molybdenum has quite a very big impact on resistance to pitting and crevice corrosion. So, you know, all in all, it's worth knowing about these things simply because really a key thing, whether it's the marine environment or any other, is understanding the material in terms of its properties, whether that's mechanical, corrosion resistance, and it's usually both with stainless steels. But also, you'll see shortly, we need a different sort of material for different zones in a marine environment. You know, by that I'm going to show you shortly, and I'm sure you'll have seen the diagram a lot yourselves, possibly. But we may need something that's more corrosion resistant, depending where it's going to be used in the marine environment. You know, is it atmospheric? Is it splash zone? Is it below the waterline? And we also have a set of casting grades. There's normally the equivalent casting grade in terms of corrosion resistance, but sometimes you will find the compositions being tailored a little bit differently in terms of ensuring the material can be used to produce a sound casting. Often it's about fluidity and flow of the metal, and you usually find elevated silicon in casting grades. But you know, some components are more economically produced by casting, so it's also worth knowing about some of these. So CFM8M, for example, is equivalent to 316 in terms of corrosion resistance. So the answer to that one is, or my original question about, is it just 1316 grade? No, and as you rightly said, there are several, quite a lot. A lot of the problems that come across our desk, particularly in the marine sort of scenario, is people not having a clue what the material is that they're using or where it's sourced and what sort of level of quality is. So these are sort of easy questions to answer. I've just got an example here of the kind of things we would use in different marine environment. In the atmosphere, and by that I mean not in the splash zone, 316 is really where it starts. You probably heard the term marine grade. I mean, I'll be quite honest, to me it's just like a commercial term or a marketing term that suggests this material is fine in a marine environment. Well, that needs a bit more qualification from my point of view, because yes, it will be fine. Marine grade 316 should be fine in the atmosphere, but not in the splash zone or subsea. It just can't perform. And I'll show you some rules of thumb on what we might be looking for in terms of piston crevice corrosion resistance.
Crevice corrosion on another shot.
Oh no, definitely. And I'll show you some nice examples just to confirm what you just said. All engineered metals corrode, and it's about the specific service conditions. You know, it might be that the service conditions suggest this is going to be an ideal material, but then the component's just left, never inspected, never particularly looked at again, maybe for many years later, several years, and before you know it, something's changed during the service history. Could be something as simple as biofilms or marine organisms are settling on it and building up on it, and we'll see some crevice corrosion examples. But you're right, it will corrode by crevicing, or can, I should say. There's always ways of minimising and preventing it. I mean, to me, where it starts is trying to choose the right grade in the first place, and that's really about, well, having an appreciation for what's out there in the first place. But even in the 316 category, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to be welding it? Do you need a higher strength or a higher corrosion resistance and maybe go for the LM or the LMN? But you know, basic questions can be asked by the specifier or the designer. I mean, a lot of questions come across my desk, my specifiers and designers, and usually they're easy questions to answer because it is about this kind of stuff. Right. Has anyone seen this kind of diagram before?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty common one in the literature, and it sort of shows you the relative corrosion rates of unprotected steel structures. It's not a bad place to start because it sort of does highlight a few things. For example, actually this should be zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, obviously, but that's my cut and paste area. You can see from this we've got you know, mean high water tidal level there, mean low water tidal level. Just above the mean high water tidal level, in what we call the splash zone, you can see we've got an increase in corrosion rate. Higher up in the atmosphere, the corrosion rate is whatever it is, but as we get closer to the splash zone, it increases. Any suggestions why that should be?
Oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen and no shortage of chloride. if we go just, so that is sort of the worst point, the splash zone. If we go below the mean low water tidal level, we've got another sort of rising peak there. Any suggestions why we might get a growth in corrosion rate at that point?
This corrosion could be microbes.
Well, this is quite generalised, and I'm not picking a specific sort of situation. But typically, this is as a result of galvanic corrosion on the same material. You get different levels of oxygen at different depths. And because it's a differential oxygen concentration, you get a differential oxygen concentration cell. So you will get flow of electrons in the metal and the usual anodic and cathodic electrochemical reactions going on. So this is largely a consequence of that. You can chuck in all the other things we've mentioned, including microorganisms, and other things will happen. So this is a little bit idealised. In fact, I probably can pretty much jump through the next two slides because I've kind of mentioned what's happening, you know, markedly above the mean high water or below the mean low water. We've got the two sort of situations. Chemical factors, mentioned that, high dissolved salt, whoops, excuse me. The thing about chloride is it's a bit of an enemy of most of the naturally passivating metals, you know, whether it's stainless steel, aluminium, or titanium. Unfortunately, it does infiltrate the structure of the passive layer, and the complexing that occurs as a result causes the passive layer to break down. And whoops, I was just going to move to this slide, but as a consequence of that, we get certain mechanisms occurring in stainless steel. The pitting mechanism, without going into the science of what's happening, the breakdown of the passive layer is occurring, and the electrochemical reactions that occur in a typical pit do actually produce hydrochloric acid. And it's also what's termed an autocatalytic reaction. It accelerates as the process is going on because the concentration of hydrochloric acid is increasing. So, you know, we've got an anode here, we've always got a cathode where some sort of oxidation of the metal is occurring. It's probably worth pointing out, I mean, whenever I do a sort of course on stainless steel, most people who are at the course have this sort of idea that stainless is stainless because it doesn't corrode. But then I start going on about crevice corrosion, pitting corrosion, stress corrosion, cracking, galvanic corrosion, blah, 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 and they're all, oh wow, I mean, it's not that great a material then, is it? But I probably should say that corrosion scientists probably would tell you that there is only one type of corrosion, and it's galvanic, in the sense that we give these labels to a type of corrosion just because it fits a particular thing that happens given the scenario. Tracing will come on to shortly. But there is always an anode and a cathode and a flow of electrons, and if it's immersed in a liquid medium, there's a flow of ions passing current through the electrolyte. So it isn't quite as bad as it sounds, it's just knowing that these kind of forms of corrosion exist. And going back to what I said originally, this is probably one big message that will come out today. It's about knowing the materials and how resistant they are and what sorts of environments cause them to break down. So hopefully that doesn't sound too much. And when it comes to something like pitting and crevice corrosion, we can actually quite confidently rely on a couple of metrics. One is the pitting resistance equivalent number, which I'm guessing some people have heard of, if not everyone. There's a few sort of nods, and it's an empirical formula that just bases the level of pitting resistance you get from the grade simply from the function of the amount of chromium times 3.3 molybdenum and what else is up there, plus 16 times nitrogen. So actually, you already see there's a way of sort of ranking a stainless steel grade in terms of how resistant to pitting and corrosion resistant crevice corrosion it's going to be. There's also something called the critical pitting temperature. The standard corrosion test, as no doubt some of you, if not all of you, appreciate. And the critical pitting temperature is simply just immersing a coupon of stainless steel in a quite aggressive oxidizing medium for a particular time, at a particular temperature, and they're taking it out and counting the number of bits, the square inch or centimetre, how deep you are, what sort of morphology they've got. Doing one or two of that kind of test can be interesting and fun, but yeah, I think you anticipate that if you've got hundreds to do it, you don't really want to do it. So we have this thing called PREN, and I'll show you some numbers on that for different grades shortly, and we have this thing called CPT, which is another test, and it identifies the lowest temperature below which you won't get fitted. So, you know, this isn't so much rocket science. You can see 304, critical fitting temperature 10, 316, 20, etc. Tube plates, super tube plates. So if you need something more resistant, there's always a place to go. As it turns out, 304, well, when people ask us, we don't recommend using 304 in a marine atmosphere. So often, particularly not so much in the marine or the boat world, the marine environment world, sometimes we're faced with architects who want to make panels or supporting structures on buildings that are in the marine corridor. And they will say, oh, can I use 304? And our standard answer is yes, if you're not bothered about the appearance of the material. And in truth, if you're not bothered about aesthetics, you could use 304. But you can guarantee it will start corroding, so at the end of the day, if you're making the decision on what you make the components from, what you choose will inevitably be how critical you regard that component. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, as a recent boat owner, I regard every component on the boat as critical. You know, I don't want to see weld seams corroding, I don't want to see, you know, the tube of the balance failing corroding, I don't want to see any rigging corroding. But you can tolerate a certain level of corrosion, and as you'll see, I'll just point out, and no doubt you're all aware anyway, there are some quite easy things you can do to improve the longevity of the material. Not least, inspect it at least, dismantle fittings a few times, and wash them if necessary, even if it's just a hose of water on the material. So, you know, what I distill from this is there's some rules of thumb. In a marine environment, we're usually looking for a PREN above about 23. 316, this is critical fitting temperature, not PREN. 316, it's about 23, 24. In the splash zone, where it's a bit more serious, you know, jumping back to the slide I showed you with sorts of corrosion rates you expect at different points in the marine environment, we're looking for something greater than 36. Submerged continuously. Really, if you want to be really confident, you're looking at PREN above 40. And you're only going to get it from a super duplex material. And here we just show some PREN numbers of, well, we've got a family of austenitic grades, we've got a family of ferritics, we've got a family of duplex grades. And you can see if we're in an atmosphere, 316 typically makes the grade, you know. You can see other grades that are much more resistant. So sometimes money's no object to people, very occasionally, not often. We'll have somebody who's doing some work for a super yacht owner, and they'll say things like, we're not bothered what it costs, what would be the best thing I can have for this? And you know, I'll just go through this sort of spiel. And so if you really want to take a sledgehammer to crack a nut, you could take 904L, which is classed as a super austenitic. You can sort of guess whenever the word super is used, it just means it's got more of the good stuff, more chromium for corrosion resistance, more nickel for relative chemical inertness, more nitrogen for strength. So super is good if you can justify paying for it. Typically, we can rule out ferritics in the marine atmosphere. Duplex, you've got many to choose from in a marine atmosphere. The nice thing about duplex is it's twice the strength typically of a standard austenitic like 316, so you can get away with half the amount for a component that's going to bear the same type of load. So actually,
the ideal for, you know, like a keel bolt.
Yeah.
It's going into a cast iron keel and it goes under a lot of stress. When it goes around, so it'd be an ideal
Well, I'll be quite honest, I've always got a bit, I know stainless steel keel bolts are used. I'm always a little bit worried about it. Yeah, I think they're more used in the States than here, aren't they? You think? Okay, it's interesting. I'm always a bit, I guess it's about the nature of the boat you've got, that you're familiar with. Because I see so many boats with rusty, well, you only have to pull the bilge, and you see the heads corroding. Now, if someone told me it was stainless steel, I think I'd be a bit concerned. I'd at least want to think about inspecting the bolts as fully as I could. Only because what concerns me is the localised corrosion mechanisms. I've already mentioned pitting, we haven't got onto crevicing. I mean, metals that corrode uniformly, to me, in a situation where you can't see particularly what's happening, and you know there are going to be gaps, but you may not even know who installed it and the sort of quality work that they do. I think it would just worry me a little bit. Obviously, it's worth going by case histories. So if there's thousands of boats out there that've got stainless steel keel bolts, and they've been lasting for decades or 2 or 3 decades, I think that's testament to how good the material could perform. I'm the sort of person that tends to over-engineer things or play safe, you know. So knowing what I do about even stainless steels where things can go wrong, I might just err terribly to the side of caution, something that's going to hold the keel to the boat. But I think your experience, obviously, that's.
It's all studs.
Yeah.
Intercast iron.
Yeah. Well, I certainly know they're used. As I say, I mean, I forgot to pass these around. I'll come back to these later. Yeah, you know, I take your point, and I mean, sometimes we're faced with questions by people, and we don't really know the answer because we're not so close to the specific service environment. And I say to the guy, well, have you got any of these in the field being used elsewhere? And I say, oh yeah, we've got 50 of them all over the country, and it's never caused a problem, but in this one circumstance, we've got a big problem. And I said, well, you've almost answered your own question, so there must be something a little bit peculiar about this one where it's all gone wrong. And then I have to ask questions like, you know, what's the nature of the design? What is it about the conditions? You know, how much chloride's in the water? Are there clear crevices that have been built into the design? Or maybe it's been triggered by something else. Maybe there's a coupler with another metal that's too far removed in the galvanic series. So there's usually something. And you know, going what you just said, it's that you play percentages sometimes. And I probably would make slightly different decisions than some people here, simply because I'm not a marine surveyor. So, as I say, I might be more tempted to over-engineer or choose a material that I knew could only corrode uniformly. So I'm not going to lose quickly. There's no risk of losing quickly the load-bearing cross-section of the component. But you know, that's a very personal view. There's enough scientists in the field who could probably give you more. Not least
if a keel, it happens a lot in yachts. If a keel has a really good bang into a rock, it's like a shot, and then it's, I don't know, stretches the bolt. Sometimes you can withdraw the bolt and have a look at it, and bang eye, it looks absolutely fine. But will it have physically weakened the stainless steel?
Well, then you get into the realm of what pre-existing flaws were present in the material. Yeah. Every engineered material, every man-made material has got some critical flaw size already in it. Yeah. It could be a consequence of inclusions in the material. And those inclusions, like the morphology, you know, there's a manganese sulfide stringer, elongated in the metal. Might only be small, but those points at the end of the inclusion will act as stress raters. So if it took a bang, it might just be enough to encourage a crack to nucleate at some point. Yeah. You know, fatigue.
It's a bit of workout on stainless steel, you know, more than
well, if you see no visible change in dimension, or it's not visible then, it won't work on so much. You know, fastness, in fact, I passed the Jubilee time clip round and there's a little screw in there. I mean, not so much in that case, but in a lot of fasteners, they are cold drawn. So the heads have been heavily cold worked. But the bottom line is, as you make something harder, you inevitably make it more brittle. But ultimately, whether it's going to be good for you or not depends on the details of this service history. And I mean, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that example because yeah, all things said and done, it never takes a bang. You don't have to worry about it. But you know examples yourself where your car took a bump and then 6 months later something needed changing. And you keep asking yourself, is that a result of that bump? You know. And the short answer is you wouldn't really know whether something had gone wrong as a result of that collision. But you just don't know, so you may just want. I think the wise thing to do would be to inspect it as thoroughly as you could, and then if you're still satisfied, well, we can live with it, or it's a fair risk. But there's no such thing as certainty in life, is there? Just a few examples then of pitting. Actually, there's a little bit of a cheat because this isn't a stainless steel component, and I actually struggled to find some corroded stainless, some pitted, heavily pitted stainless steel examples. But this is a aluminium windlass housing, and you can't see too well from there, but you can see where the chloride's got to the surface. It's become very heavily pitted. Now you might be happy with that. I mean, this kind of thing usually only happens because no one has inspected it or even cleaned it regularly, and it's just been left in service for many, many years. And then when maybe something's noticeably going a little bit wrong, people start looking at it, and then maybe it's a bit too late and make a judgment, we'll change this component. But I chuck this in a way also quite cheaply because stainless steel does fit, it does suffer crevice corrosion, so does aluminium, so does titanium. You know, the key thing really is what conditions cause it to fit and crevice corrode. There's a little example here which almost looks a bit pathetic in comparison to the aluminium, and I'm not using this as a way of promoting stainless steel, but it shows the kind of thing you could see on some pulpit railing or something. The thing about pitting is it's a little bit insidious in that often you can't even see the pits, and the pit can have a sort of lid on it, and underneath the subsurface is a huge cavity. And that can quite easily, and very often, it does end up feeding into stress corrosion cracking in the wrong conditions. So anywhere where there's a physical abrupt feature like a pit.
But you sometimes find that on propeller shafts that have been passed through cutlass bearings,
Yeah.
and they haven't been turned for years.
Yeah.
So you get the shaft out, the pits all the way along, you can see
Yeah.
pick up the rubber of the cutlass bearing.
Yeah, and I mean a key question is, and this often people ask me, is there a risk of corrosion in this situation? And the answer is almost inevitably yes. But the key question is, well, what is the corrosion rate likely to be? And what's the form of corrosion that might occur or is occurring? Because can that feed into something else a bit more worrying, like a pit becoming a prominent stress raising point, and ultimately you start getting stress corrosion cracks growing from that point. You know, so it's the devil's always in the detail. It's always a little bit more complicated than just saying this is how pitting occurs, this is how crevice corrosion occurs. If you want to protect, use this grade here. Look, it's much more resistant to crevice corrosion or pitting, but you still don't know for sure. Did that do the rounds? I'll come back to you with a question about this because I'd be interested in on the viewpoint on this. Let's quickly go to crevices then. Similarly, we can identify a critical crevice temperature. Not surprisingly, it increases a little bit of a abrupt scale here, but it increases with critical fitting temperature. And actually, there's a pretty much linear relationship to crevicing and pitting. So if you know you've got a high fitting resistant material, you know you've got a more resistant material to crevicing as well. There's been a lot of science and testing done with stainless steel crates, and it's well understood that there are certain critical solutions that can initiate crevicing. Now, this doesn't give the pH and the chloride concentration data, but there is some data allied with this. This just shows you what the average crevice gap size is for you to get corrosion or crevice corrosion for a whole range of alloys. 304 can occur at quite a big gap size. 316, it's smaller. You can go right up to a nickel-based superalloy and you're at a very small gap size. Now, the reality is that most fittings, you'd be hard pushed. Usually the gap sizes range between 0.2 and 0.5, just because of the tolerance on the fittings. It would be virtually impossible to get a gap size like this. We also know what was married with this curve is as we go up here, we go from something like 2 times the chloride concentration in seawater to about 10 or more times. So you know it's virtually impossible to find crevice corrosion or pitting in these kind of alloys, because you're just never going to get the, well, it's just extremely unlikely to get the conditions that are going to give rise to it. Something showing a similar sort of information, but it's really just picking out 304 and 316 and 904L, which probably the big three you might want to consider. You can almost certainly rule out 304 if you don't want the risk of hitting. I've been talking a lot about the marine atmosphere, not on subsea. So we usually rule out 304. Type 316, yes, it can tolerate the atmosphere, but keep an eye on it and clean it down and wash it. Type 904L, which is much more resistant to crevice corrosion attack. You can see this is crevice corrosion resistance and this is the chloride level. We can withstand a much higher chloride level with 904L. I'm going to skip through some of the slides and be very quick about them, only because I think I'm sort of running out of time. We can actually protect against crevice corrosion and pitting corrosion by, well, just using standard cathodic protection techniques. But by the same token, if we couple that material to a much more noble metal, we can accelerate it as well. And this is just to illustrate the point, this is just a plot of, it's 2205, which is a duplex grade. That's actually called the standard duplex grade. So it's nothing special, but it's still very corrosion resistant. But if we couple it to something more noble, you probably won't recognise these names. Conifer 1925 is a very high chrome, high nickel stainless steel, considerably more corrosion resistant than 2205. Our crevice corrosion rate goes up. Similarly, if we couple it to something less noble, this is almost equivalent to 316, this Conifer 1812, and this is coupled to a copper nickel alloy, it can go down. So it's quite common for me to deal with these different sorts of corrosion mechanisms as if it's something separate. But the reality is they can occur concomitantly. You know, we don't usually get stress corrosion cracking without having seen some hitting on some crevicing. Similarly, something might be driving the crevicing or the pitting harder because your stainless steel or another marine metal is coupled to maybe what we call the wrong material. That said, I realise sometimes you have to join metals just because of circumstances. Quite often we get asked, oh, is it okay to weld stainless steel to mild steel? Well, if someone's designing something from scratch and they tell me what, or they ask our office what they're doing, we probably would ask them to try and avoid that. But sometimes retrospectively people have got all these mild steel structures and yet they still need something more corrosion resistant. So they're not going to get away from doing something else, adding another metal that gives them a different set of properties. And there are answers to it. Yes, you can weld it, but advice would be protect the mild steel with some sort of corrosion protected coating. So there's always engineering solutions to sometimes very often difficult answers. Here we kind of see crevice corrosion in a component, and it sort of gives us a few things to shoot at this one. Here we've got corrosion actually in the thread of the nut. So you can see in the threads we've got signs of corrosion. We've got at the end of this plug that's designed to sort of protect the tube, we've got crevice corrosion occurring in there. Here we've got sealant that doesn't extend right to the end of this bracket, so we've got crevice corrosion there. So it's not hard to see how it can occur, and maybe do things, preventative things, to minimise it or try and eliminate it. Other examples, and this is a prop shaft from a Jeannot, and it's a deep crevice. I mean, actually, there wasn't just crevicing around the taper section. You can see crevice corrosion around here, and there's a suggestion that the prop wasn't sitting cleanly free. It was overlapping the taper section, and some of this, I mean, this is one that was pulled out of the water after 9 years. So you'd have thought that you'd have pulled it after a year, or maybe the sort of a couple of years, you'd have picked up on things like that. But it sort of links to the example you mentioned earlier. And another crevice corrosion example, but this time we've got a lot of biofouling on here. And the thing about crevice corrosion is it doesn't just occur it occurs in a shielded area, but it doesn't have to be shielded by metal. If there's an insulating material on the metal, or even the biological organism, barnacles, biofilms, it will occur in these. Yeah.
We call it poultice corrosion.
So no, yeah. Well, I mean, in order of events, there'll be a shielded area which can support a different microenvironment, and there'll be a depletion of oxygen in that region. Add to that some sort of corrosive agent like chloride ions, and you've got a nice recipe for completely destroying the passive layer that's protected the stainless steel in the first place. But it'll do the same to aluminium alloys and titanium. The different grades have a different propensity for resisting, as I've mentioned. But all the metals that do produce a protected passive layer can ultimately have a passive layer undermined. More examples there. This was an interesting example because this doesn't look that severe. It just looks like this. I mean, I don't like seeing things corroded. And ironically, I think all the marine surveyors I come in contact with, or boat owners, I'm asking for, have you got any corroded samples? Usually that raises a bit of a smile because they usually want to get rid of them. But this doesn't look that severe. It looks like there is some surface rust, but on dismantling this toggle fitting, it just broke apart. So it was concluded, without doing any more detailed analysis, that and from the visible appearance of the sort of socket that was left behind and the threaded part, that the crevice corrosion had just eaten away the whole load supporting bracket, or at least it was very close to. So it didn't take much for that to fall apart. These are the kind of things you see quite regularly, a lot a consequence of neglect and no one doing some cursory things like cleaning. Sometimes it is also the wrong grade. Let me just come back to this, because this is something that you see quite commonly on those. I mean, I sent around these Googling clips, and I think those of you that saw them probably did see these quite corroded nuts, or screws, I should say. Not so much corrosion on the actual flip itself. But how would you think that corrosion came about?
They're still not the same material, are they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, often you find that these screw parts are A1 or A2. This might be 316, and this can't withstand the marine environment anyway. Now, no doubt it won't have it won't be as resistant to heating or crevicing. But even if that wasn't used in that sort of component, it'll be corroding anyway. I mean, you often see, I've even seen cases of you lift an ankle locker up and you'll see mild steel nuts on what might be stainless steel threaded components, and the nut is just rusted to pieces. And they're very easy things to remedy. And but I suppose the other key thing is often in the tandem rate, you don't know what it's made from, and often the retailer or the person who's selling it doesn't know where it's come from. I'm often asking about grades, and I'm always surprised they never know anything about that. So then I start going back to who's the supplying company and ask them. But I mean, suppliers of components, they sometimes just want to make a fast buck. They'll buy anything from the cheapest source if it allows them to fabricate something that they feel, yeah, we can sell that. So China. Yeah, funny enough, it's an increasing thing that crops up. I have people ringing wanting a supplier, and they said, we want a European supplier, I want a USA supplier. you know, we've bought in China and we've been bitten and stung once because the material didn't perform. I think what I find amusing a little bit sometimes is you can get a lot of good quality material from China, but also, because it's producing more than half the world's stainless steel, so disproportionately it's feeding poor quality material, plus some of the standards we have aren't used in China. But sometimes it's amusing when someone will say, we've got this 316 from a Chinese source, it's rusted to pieces, we don't think it's 316, how can I check it? Or how do I know it's 316? And usually the supplier will have a paper trail to the mill certificate that's got the composition and mechanical properties. And typically someone will say, oh, I got this piece of paper and it had all Chinese writing on it. And I'll say, they'll actually send me a copy. And I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese or you know, or Cantonese or whatever. And you kind of think, well, there's a disconnect here because common sense would, I'd be wanting to see something in a language I understood. And if they couldn't provide it, not knocking them, I think I better stick to someone who can give me paperwork I can understand. So, you know, some of it is actually common sense. Actually, this just shows you the effect of nickel on stress corrosion cracking. Now, I should mention stress corrosion cracking is essentially two prerequisites: a tensile force and some sort of corrosive agent. And the reason it's termed stress corrosion cracking is simply that it wouldn't occur if either of those factors were missing. But in 316, it's not usually found below about 60 degrees. It's not impossible for it to occur below 60 degrees. 304, it would occur at 30 degrees. I'm going to ask you a question from an example because it raises an interesting question. But you can see the effect of nickel. Duplex has high nickel, so you end up being more resistant to stress corrosion cracking. Superaustenitic are up here too. If you're around about 304, 316, you're actually least protected against stress corrosion cracking, which may or may not be an issue depending on ambient temperatures. These are the kind of things you do see: swage fittings and corrosion build up and then cracking. Now, unless you do a lot of detailed metallography, you can't be certain, but it's very likely that there'll have been sometimes these are over tightened when they swage. There's a high stress in those at the ends of these fittings, and it's a bit out of sight that there could be some crevicing on the other side, some pitting, which has allowed stress to be relieved. It's ultimately opened up a crack. So you see that kind of thing. You see, you know, broken wire on rigging and shrouds. You can think of all sorts of ways this happened, and really, and sometimes people will send me one picture and say how much it's happened, and you can't do failure analysis from looking at one picture. You can hazard a guess, and you can give your most considered opinion, but usually a lot more work has to be done than that. This was an interesting one because it came from the Lifeboat Association. They got this bracket that was supporting an outboard motor. Oops. And they're only using it it's a prototype bracket. They're only using it they'd only used it a few times, and they kept getting it cracking. And you can see where they've done some dye penetrant testing. You've been looking at whether there's any cracks at the surface. You can see signs of cracks there. And it actually is at this corner here. And, you know, the guy said, well, what's causing this? We think it's fatigue or stress corrosion cracking. Now, there's only a few ways the material can crack, or a few ways the stainless steel can crack. It's either stress corrosion cracking, it's either fatigue related, or the components being so overloaded that you've gone past the proof strength of the material, it's deforming, and you're either getting ductile or brittle failure that's opening up the material. This didn't seem to be stress heavy at all, although it hasn't been quantified. And there was the only thing the guy said was there was quite a lot of heavy vibration, but a key thing was these edges had been laser cut, and to the finger it was very rough and sharp. So you know that there's quite a likelihood of stress intensity raising at those points. And it is cracking, that was indisputable, so it's very likely that just that roughness has had an impact on prevalence of cracking. Easy one to solve potentially. Just dress the edges, clean them up, or switch to something like duplex, which has got a higher fatigue endurance limit. So there's always somewhere to go, and sometimes I can't present in all these cases what the entire service history is, or even what all the service conditions are. But they allow me to at least to sort of just build on what I've already said. Hilary, how long's left? Couple of minutes.
Sorry.
No, it don't matter because I'm going to go very quickly through these slides. I mean, galvanic corrosion, I've sort of even got it, I've sort of mentioned it already. You're probably familiar, you might be familiar with this diagram, but you might have seen the galvanic seawater, galvanic seaweeds in seawater. You see it under different names. All it is a big list of metals, which are showing which ones are the more anodic, which ones are the more cathodic. And the rule of thumb is, if you've got to put metals together in your design, choose metals that are close together. If you can, you make it all out of the same stuff. Because the further away you are, the further apart you are with your metal choice. The further apart you are with metal choice, the bigger the galvanic corrosion current will be when that component is in contact with an electrolyte continuously. You'll get these slides, so in a way you come back to that, I go very quickly, but you get, there's no shortage of corrosion data when it comes to performance of metals in the marine environment. The big two that stand out here are stainless steel, corrosion rates in marine and even in rural and urban areas, pretty low. Same with aluminium alloys. There's another plot there showing you the likelihood of significantly increasing the corrosion rate if you put the wrong metals together. It's a simple matrix of just putting two metals together. An example of a stern drive, aluminium and stainless steel. The rule usually is don't put aluminium and stainless steel together, particularly if the aluminium has got a small surface area relative to the more cathodic material or stainless steel. Simply because if the cathodic area is big in surface area, the current driving the corrosion is bigger over a smaller area, so you'll lose material section thickness quicker. So there's some very straightforward rules on avoiding. I'm going to skip they're all learning points, but they're very easy for you to read this out. Just one thing I was going to come back to, and it was something I started with right at the beginning, the difference between L and non-L grades. If you've got 316 and it's the high carbon grade, not the L grade, and you're welding it, because you've got to raise the temperature, whatever welding technique you use, very likely between about 500 and 600. Very quickly, carbon diffuses to grain boundaries and forms chromium carbide. That depletes chromium from the grain boundaries. Effectively, you've got a different grade at the grain boundaries because it's not as high in chromium. So if and that's what we call sensitization. So if this chromium carbide is present after welding it, the material becomes sensitized. If you then put that into a adverse environment, like a marine environment, it'll be prone to intergranular corrosion. You know, the grain boundary is going to be attacked. So very simple rule there to avoid that. And actually, this just shows you temperature versus time to the formation of chromium carbide. In the metallurgy world, you often get these C-type curves. Each one of these C curves shows you the point you can expect to have got chromium carbide forming. And you'll see that this set of curves here, this is 0.088% carbon in an 18.8. This is like a 3.1, it's like a 304 material. But you've literally got that. This is a log scale, this is hours, so we've got 10 minutes there. We've literally got a few minutes before we'll get chromium carbide precipitation at the high carbon end. If we've got an L grade, we've got 0.038% carbon in an L grade, we've suddenly got 10 hours. So you'd have to be a pretty high welder to have kept the material at temperature for 10 hours, so you're on very safe ground. And some quick summarising comments. I mean, the key one is it's about material selection, isn't it? Knowing the material, what the properties are, and what environment it's going to expect it to perform in. Sorry,
If you were welding, what type of filler would you use?
well, with the standard standard oxidation grade, you can use like-for-like fillers. But sometimes, from a dilution effect point of view, you might want to use an over-alloyed filler.
If you need those things to stay.
Put it this way, for the two standard austenitic silicone fuel six, people often use a like filler. But sometimes people, if they're worried about the strength, they will use a slightly over-alloy filler. Actually, I routinely send out matrices of fillers to use when you're welding the same stainless steels or different stainless steels, and even fillers to use with mild stainless steel. So these are an answer to all those questions. The key thing with welding austenitics is, I didn't particularly point out at the beginning, but when I briefly showed you those atomic structures, the thing about a ferritic stainless steel is it's got a more open structure. Now, when you're welding, there's an advantage to having 5 to 10% of ferrite grains in the weld seam, because if your grains got things like phosphorus and silicon, boron, they can segregate to grain boundaries and form glassy phases there and make the weld very weak. For a few ferritic grains, like a zinc, it mops up all these impurities that can form low melting point compounds. So there are some other caveats to go with welding austenitic grades. So actually it comes down to a few things really to get better performance. One is no material, no service conditions it's performing in. 2 is the design. You can design out braces. You can even design structures to be naturally washing or ensuring no water is going to be building up there, so that when subsequent sorts of condensation evaporation cycle go, you're not going to naturally get salt before chloride builds up. And of course, you can control corrosion by other means, cathodic protection, coatings, impressed current, which I haven't particularly mentioned anything about. Probably because of the time, it's a really good point to wrap up. So, if there were any more questions, this is a good time to ask them.
That comment around coatings, it's something we don't normally do with stainless steel. What coating does work well?
I'll be quite honest, when everyone asks me and it crops up about protected stainless steel, I'm always very cautious and I say, well, look, let's at least appreciate this. If you start painting or covering stainless up, you're actually destroying the protection. The natural thing that's giving you the protection is a passive layer. Now you're going to rely on a barrier effect from this coating. Now there are specialist coatings to protect stainless steel. Some of them are like epoxy-based systems. Some of them have pigments in that actually lengthen the diffusion pattern of things, so it takes longer for the harmful agent to get to the stainless. But I can't quite envisage a component in stainless steel that's been coated that hasn't got some protectors somewhere, or a bend, or it's difficult to get the coverage uniform. So the thing I usually say is, yes, we have got specialist member companies who supply protective systems for stainless steel, but keep this in mind. Make sure you know that it's going to be coated in the best, under optimum parameters, because if you want the highest possible integrity, because if any point fails, and the point of weakness is the bottleneck is that edge or something that you've cut. So I kind of generally discourage people from coating stainless, but there are systems that
you're almost a job like a cosmetic reason only. You're still going to choose the stainless steel based on the right method for that location. Coat it for cosmetic reasons.
And often that's the reason people don't want the silverish and they want the cut specific colour.
But I find the problem is below the waterline where they've got brushes or bracketry and that sort of thing, where they've got stainless steel brackets and bolts and they've anti-foul and you've got nylon nuts that are just fizzing away underneath.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the best thing with stainless is let it do its job. If it's in an environment where plastic label form that, so if it's 316 below the waterline, you've got it, it's probably to protect it. In fact, the only stainless steel grades that can perform well subsea, and it's not just below the low tide water time level, but deep sea, even though the oxygen is super duplex alloys, which have a very high over PREN over 40.